My name is Luis Trujillo. I'm the Chief Scholarship Expert at Scholarship Owl. And today we have a very special guest, Mark here. He's an expert as well in the scholarship industry. And so I'm really excited to have him. I was just getting done telling him that I've seen him throughout my high school and college career. So it's definitely a privilege to have him here today. With that being said, Mark, why don't you share a little bit about what you shared with me, just so the students can get a glimpse into, who you are. You're not just this vague scholarship guy. Let's just let the students know a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have 2 Bachelor of Science degrees from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one in mathematics, the other in philosophy. I went to Carnegie Mellon University for graduate school in computer science. I've worked as a research scientist, very analytical approach. I paid for my undergraduate and graduate education entirely through scholarships and fellowships, and actually graduated from undergraduate school with more money than when I started, because I, in addition to the scholarships, I worked as a software engineer during the summers and vacations.
So that sounds to me like you didn't sit on your hands and expect everything to fall into your lap.
No, I was aggressive in searching for scholarships. I treated it like a full-time job almost. And certainly evenings and weekends, I was looking for scholarships and applying for them.
Right.
Back then, there weren't these online scholarship databases. Like on CapEx, we have capex.com/scholarships, which make it easy to find scholarships. I had to do not just looking in the local public library at these scholarship listing books and going through them page by page. I also went to local businesses and asked them if they sponsored a scholarship. And sometimes I suggested that maybe they should. And then I would enter, and creating a scholarship that I could win. And I was also, I would apply to hundreds of scholarships for which I was eligible, increasing my chances of winning one. Because it's not just a matter of skill, it's also a matter of luck. It's very hard for a scholarship selection committee to choose among several qualified applicants. In some ways, it's completely random factors that cause one student to win and the other student to be a finalist or runner-up.
Right.
And so by applying to more scholarships, some of them you won't win in random draw, whereas some of them you will win. And so the more scholarships you apply to, the greater your chances are of winning one or more.
Right. And I think what you said is really good. It's mostly because I always try to tell students that when you're out applying for scholarships, you don't want to treat it like it's a hobby. Because when you do, you really don't get the results you expect. Because a lot of students, they come in and they think, well, I'm just going to fill out 3 scholarships. For sure, I got to get one of them. And they end up getting nothing, because it's kind of like if you go to work and you don't punch the clock and you're not working any hours, you don't expect to get paid, right? It's like you've got to have this mentality of this is like a second job. And I had the same mentality as you whenever I went at this. I said, this is like a job. I've got to treat it like a job because it's going to end up paying me probably better than a job. And so I have a similar idea and I had a similar journey as yours. What do you think about that?
Well, consider that, let's say your odds of winning a scholarship are 1 in 10, and you apply to 10 scholarships. So odds are you're going to win one of them. And if it's maybe a $500 scholarship, students don't like the low dollar amounts because they think it's not worth their time. But if you spend 10 hours applying to 10 scholarships total, and you win one, then you spend 10 hours winning, let's say, $500. That's $50 an hour. I don't know of any high school student who can earn $50 an hour doing something legal.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, you really do have to be very methodical. You have to apply not just to 2 or 3 scholarships, but to dozens upon dozens of scholarships. And you will get far more rejections than you get wins. And many of these scholarships, it's relatively easy to enter. And it takes about an hour to complete an application, including writing the essay. And after you've written your first half dozen essays, you'll find that you can reuse your previous essays. And you have to be careful that if you mention the name of the scholarship in the essay, that you change it. Otherwise, it'll be embarrassing when you say, I'm applying for the XYZ scholarship when it's actually the ABC scholarship.
Right.
But it then takes a lot less time for each subsequent scholarship. On the other hand, though, there are some scholarships like science fair scholarships where you have to have a science fair project. That's not something that you can do in half an hour or an hour. That requires a lot of advanced preparation. But again, that is in an area, one of your core areas where you have expertise, where you have a lot of depth. And those are the scholarships where you have the greatest chances of winning. And depth matters a lot more than breadth in terms of whether you win a scholarship. Because the scholarship sponsors, they want the best student for their award, not just someone who's interested in the topic.
Yeah. And one thing that I found is that my first few scholarships I filled out, I was a little bit more nervous about writing the essay. But after my 20th scholarship, I almost feel like my skills were so sharp by then. It was almost like it was too easy because I had already written 10 essays that I could practically, not rehash, but reuse and maybe even move some things around and make it still a great essay. So I kind of felt as if the longer I did it, even the more scholarships I would win because my skill level was just going up. It's just practice. You always hear, you got to practice to get better. And that applies to scholarships too. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and the more you work on with the same essay, each time you're going to improve it. So the essays get better and better. And this is great practice for your college admissions applications because oftentimes the essays are quite similar. And there's almost always going to be a personal statement, which is you tell about your academic and other strengths, what makes you stand out from other people. So there's always going to be an essay like that. And you write it for a half dozen scholarships. Well, that same essay out of that process is one that you can adapt for your college admission applications, increasing your chances of getting into your dream college.
Yeah. And I actually, I think I use that same method that you just mentioned, and it does work. Now, another thing that I've always been asked is small scholarships versus big scholarships. Okay. You touched on it a little bit, but for me, I know personally, the small scholarships actually paid for the entirety of my college, from my bachelor's to my master's. Whereas a lot of students I know, they get that big scholarship and it pays for everything. What is your opinion? Like, what should students be looking for? Like, should they be going for both? Should they be focusing on one or the other? What's your approach?
Well, you should apply for every scholarship for which you're eligible, small or large. Students have a tendency to ignore the small scholarships, but those small scholarship amounts add up to substantial money. Every dollar you win in scholarships is a dollar less you're going to have to borrow. So you are going to save money by winning those scholarships. And these small scholarships add lines to your resume that can help you win the bigger awards. The smaller scholarships tend to have less competition because the students don't like small awards. They are less likely to apply for them, even though many of those small scholarships have less selective admissions. They have less specific selection criteria. So you end up with ones that are somewhat like a random drawing almost, or ones that are essay competitions, which is another type of scholarship that students don't seem to like. So your odds of winning those scholarships are greater than for that $25,000 or $250,000 scholarship that everybody wants to enter because it's going for the gold. And you'd win that one scholarship and you're done. But your chances of winning that one scholarship are a lot slimmer because instead of competing against hundreds of students, you're competing against hundreds of thousands of students.
Right.
So you need to apply for both. And if you are among the most talented in your area that matches that scholarship, if it's a big scholarship, you may very well win it. But many students will piece together a lot of smaller scholarships and therefore be more likely to accumulate at least some money. The other
Right.
thing is scholarships are part of your plan for paying for college, but they're not the entire plan. Only about 1 in 8 students has won scholarships for college, and the average amount that they're using each year is about $4,000. So it is not a complete solution. You're still going to need to file the free application for federal student aid and thereby apply for federal and state grants, maybe also institutional money, such as grants from the college itself. And you probably also need to rely on loans, though, and if you go to a less expensive college and win more scholarships, you may not have to borrow anything. I didn't borrow anything for my undergraduate or graduate education, but that's relatively rare. More than 2/3 of current bachelor degree recipients graduate with student loan debt.
Yeah, and me personally, Mark, I remember just to touch back on this a small scholarship. I do remember one time I looked up a scholarship and it was in a newspaper article and online actually, and I showed up and there was 2 people, 2 people that I was competing against. And I won that $500 scholarship. So $500 is not a lot of money. But I was very methodical and I took the approach of every dollar counts. And so I went chipping through all these local scholarships, winning 250, $500, 1,000. And by the time I knew it, I was sitting on a big pile of cash, because I had 2 or 3 people competing with me. And a lot of people don't believe me. Because, they're going for the big scholarships. I actually went for those and I won none. I'm just be honest here. I didn't win any of the big scholarships, but like you said, you've got to kind of shotgun this and you just got to apply for what you qualify for. You just never know what you're going to get. So with that being said, what part does your SAT and your ACT scores play as far as your scholarship package that you're going to receive? Like, what should students be looking for in a college when it comes to that type of aid?
Well, first of all, of the private scholarships that are not college controlled, only about 10% of them select you based on your admissions test scores. And there is the National Merit Scholarship, but aside from that, very few of them even ask for that information. However, students who have higher SAT or ACT test scores tend to win more scholarships. It's not because the test scores are enabling them to win, but rather students who win more scholarships tend to be the same students who also perform better academically. They're a little bit more focused. They excel in 1 or 2 areas that often have an academic aspect to them, which helps them do better in winning scholarships and do better in school. Now, with regard to college admission, the higher your test scores, the more likely you are to enter. But at the most selective institutions where they accept only less than 10% of their applicants, they get so many qualified applicants that they look for other criteria besides just having a good high school grades and a good SAT or ACT test score. I mean, that's kind of a given. Then they're looking for other factors. How else are you going to contribute to the campus culture besides just being a very studious student? I mean, are you going to be on one of the athletic teams? Are you involved in art? Are you excellent at some musical instrument? Are you good at organizing? Will you participate in various hobbies? The student newspaper, the student radio station, and some colleges have model railroad clubs. And all of that is a way in which the students contribute both formally and informally to the education of themselves and their fellow students. And so SATs are not the entire selection criteria. They're an important one, but even if you have bad SAT scores, if you have good grades, that can compensate. And if you're strong in other areas, that can compensate.
Right, right. Now, I just have maybe a bit of a controversial question to ask you, just to piquing my curiosity now that you're talking about that. So just a personal opinion, not necessarily, this doesn't necessarily have to be concrete, but would you prefer for a student to attend a more affordable college and get the same degree than try to attend a more prestigious college, get that same degree, but end up maybe $20,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt extra?
Well,
what's your approach? Like, if you had a kid and that was your situation, what would you do?
Well, I would first of all recommend that you always apply to a mix of colleges. So not just reach schools where your odds of getting in are really low, but also good match schools and safety schools. But in particular, I would recommend applying to a financial aid safety school, which is a college where you not only can get in, but where you could afford to attend even if you got no financial aid. And that's often going to be an in-state public college. And if you look at these in-state public colleges, especially the flagship institutions, they are providing a great quality education, but at half to a third the cost of a private nonprofit college. The only exceptions being about 6 dozen colleges that have generous no loans financial aid policies, such as all the Ivy League institutions, but those are also very competitive institutions. So if you're choosing between a free ride at a less well-known institution and significant amounts of debt at a college with a bigger brand name, I would go to the less well-known institution because you'll get a better quality education you'll get as good, if not better quality education at a bargain price. And otherwise, consider, are you going to be overborrowing or are you going to be borrowing a reasonable and affordable amount of debt? So the average debt at graduation is around $35,000 these days. And if your total debt at graduation is less than your annual starting salary, you'll be able to afford to repay your student loans in 10 years or less. That's reasonable. But if you're going to be having a 2-to-1 or a higher debt-to-income ratio, where your income, and let's say your annual income is $40,000 a year, but you graduated with $80,000 in debt, well, that's maybe you should choose a less expensive college. Keeping in mind that 90% of college graduates graduate with less than $50,000 in student loan debt. So you don't need to go to a $50,000, $60,000, or $70,000 a year school to get a great quality education. And consider that the Ivy League institutions graduate more PhDs in a year than they hire as faculty. All those PhDs need to go somewhere else to teach. So you're getting a great faculty at all these colleges. The primary differences between colleges is not in the faculty, it's not in the facilities, it's in the students. The students, you spend as much time outside the classroom learning from your peers, working on problem sets together, studying for exams, and in informal learning situations than you do sitting in a classroom listening to lectures. So most importantly, when you're considering colleges, visit the campus while classes are in session, stay overnight in the dorm, sit in on a few classes, but hang out with the students. Eat the food in the cafeteria, because if you don't like it on the first time you try it, you're going to hate it after 4 years. Yeah. But get a feeling for the campus and how well you would fit in. That's going to help you decide which is the best college for you, much more so than looking at numbers on a piece of paper.
So in picking your college, I mean, obviously the financial side's important. You liking the campus, students, and all of that. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on was activities on campus. Students often miss the opportunity to win some scholarships because, maybe they played band in high school, but in college, they really don't want to do it. Little do they know that there's actually scholarships for different activities that you do on campus. Would you touch on that a little bit?
Well, students often think that the scholarships are things that you apply for as a high school senior. And many of them even miss the scholarships with deadlines in the fall because they don't start worrying about it until spring. And that's half the deadlines. But there are scholarships that you can win in younger grades and scholarships that you can only apply for after you're already on a college campus. So you should continue your scholarship search even after you're admitted and you've chosen a college and you show up on campus, because there are many awards that you can win when you're on college campus. And your interests may change. You may have been interested in musical instrument all through high school, but when you arrive on college campus, you're much more interested in some other topic, maybe the yearbook or a student newspaper. And so your interests will change, but you can develop new interests and apply for scholarships based on those interests as well as your former strengths.
I actually know a parent that I've been helping their student for the last few years, and that student actually, they won a scholarship in 6th grade. Most people don't realize that there's scholarships literally for almost anything, and even for the lower grades. What kind of scholarships, or how do you find those scholarships, Mark? Do you know how to even find those kind of scholarships for people who want to start, off early, or parents who are watching this that want to start off early?
Right. So finding the scholarships for children under age 13 is more difficult because of a federal privacy law called the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. And that prohibits collecting personally identifiable information from someone under the age of 13 without verifiable parental consent. So a free scholarship database, they can't collect verifiable parental consent because, well, that's like a credit card. They're not set up for that. But several of them have compiled lists of scholarships under age 13, for students under age 13. We have one on CapEx, and there are quite a few of them. There's a scholarship that everybody knows is a scholarship, but they don't. If you ask them to list scholarships for younger children, it's not going to be on their list, and that's the National Spelling Bee. That's a major scholarship competition, but you tell them, people say, oh yeah, that's a scholarship competition. You ask them to list scholarship competitions for younger kids, they don't include it. So National Spelling Bee, National History Day competition, there's a scholarship for Mibsters, which are children who play with marbles, the game of marbles. I think that's about $5,000. Doodle for Google, and where you decorate the Google logo. They have a version of it for the younger kids. There used to be a scholarship from Jif Peanut Butter that was really nice. It was a $25,000 scholarship, but they discontinued it recently, and I think that's unfortunate. There are many, many scholarships for children under age 13.
Nice. Well, so are there any other just ending thoughts here as we're getting to the end that you would like to tell parents and students that are going to be watching this webinar?
And so I'd like to caution students and parents to avoid scholarship scams. These are scholarships that charge some kind of a fee. It may even sound plausible, like the taxes or a processing fee. But if you have to pay money to get money, it's probably a scam. Scholarships are about giving out money, not collecting money. So you should never invest more than a postage stamp to find out information about scholarships or to apply for scholarships. And use the free scholarship matching websites. And I suggest using 2 of them. That way you can be certain that you found all the scholarships for which you're eligible. You'll find a huge amount of overlap among the various databases. And if there's any kind of a fee involved, don't apply for it. It's a waste of your money.
Yes, sir. Well, we appreciate you coming on here, Mark, and giving us a all that wisdom and all that knowledge. I know that parents and students are going to be excited to hear this. And we'll see you maybe on another call. I think they're going to love it. So thank you for coming on the Zoom call with us today.
You're welcome.